Your worth is not determined by who left you, who ignored you, or who failed to see the value that you brought into their life. When someone walks away, it is very easy for the mind to create a story that something must be wrong with you. You begin replaying every moment, every conversation, every flaw you think you have, trying to understand why their absence suddenly feels like a judgment of your existence. But what you must understand deeply, completely, and without hesitation is that another person's decision is not a mirror that reflects your value. It is only a reflection of their capacity, their readiness, their mindset, and their emotional maturity at that moment in time. People don't leave because you lack something. People leave because they lack something they don't know how to give or sustain. When you attach your worth to someone's presence, you give them permission to control your emotional weather. Their silence becomes your sadness, their distance becomes your doubt, and their choices become your confusion. But your worth is not a product of external approval. It never was. Even before he entered your life, you were whole. Before he appreciated you, you had value. Before he complimented you, you were deserving. Before he loved you, you were already enough. Somewhere along the journey, you forgot that your worth is internal, not external. It is built into your being, not handed to you by another person. This is why when someone walks away, the pain feels like a subtraction. You believe they took a part of you with them. But what they really took was the illusion that your value depended on them. And when that illusion disappears, the truth starts to rise. The truth is that people leave for many reasons: fear, insecurity, immaturity, lack of direction, emotional confusion, or simply because their season in your story is complete. None of those reasons point to a flaw in your worth. When a person walks out, it does not decrease your value any more than a collector walking past a diamond decreases the diamond's worth. Your value doesn't change because someone failed to recognize it. The mistake we make is believing that losing someone means losing our identity. You begin to shrink under the weight of, why wasn't I enough? Without realizing that you were more than enough. Sometimes you were too much for someone who didn't know how to handle depth, loyalty, patience, commitment, or emotional honesty. Sometimes you were too stable for someone addicted to chaos. Sometimes you were too genuine for someone who only understood temporary connections. Sometimes you offered a level of love that a person wasn't prepared to receive. None of these point back to your inadequacy. Hopelessness often comes from believing that someone's absence defines your future, as if your story cannot move forward without their presence. But you must begin to understand that life does not revolve around who comes or who goes. It revolves around who you become. The deeper truth is that their departure didn't break you. It revealed you. It showed you the parts of yourself you were hiding, the insecurities you were ignoring, and the strength you didn't know you had. It showed you how deeply you could love, how loyal you could be, and how resilient you are even when your heart feels heavy. You may feel abandoned, but what you are really experiencing is a call to rediscover the parts of yourself you buried while trying to keep someone else comfortable. Your worth is not flexible. It does not rise when someone loves you and fall when someone leaves. Your worth is fixed. It is established. It is rooted. It is not a currency that changes value depending on who is invested in you. It is something permanent, something intrinsic, something built into your identity. But the longer you sit in the belief that someone's absence defines your significance, the more you allow your mind to become a prison. You begin to chase answers that will never bring peace. You begin to lower your standards to match their behavior. You begin to question your beauty, your kindness, your personality, your efforts, your intentions, and your entire existence simply because one person could not stay. The moment you detach your worth from anyone's decision, you take your power back. You begin to heal from the inside out. You begin to see that their departure did not reduce you. It simply revealed that they were never aligned with the next level of your life. You begin to see yourself not as someone abandoned, but as someone redirected. You begin to realize that your value does not require validation and your identity does not need permission. And the day you reclaim this truth is the day hopelessness begins to fade, not because he returned, but because you return to yourself. Pain is a signal, not a sentence. And yet when you're hurting, it's easy to believe that what you're feeling right now is your new reality. The mind starts to convince you that this pain will last forever, that the heaviness in your chest is permanent, and that the emptiness created by his absence is something you will have to live with for the rest of your life. But pain is not here to imprison you. It is here to instruct you. It is a messenger that arrives when something in you needs attention, when something in your life needs shifting, when something in your perspective needs healing. The problem is that most of us try to run from pain instead of listening to what it's trying to teach us. We think avoiding it will make it disappear, but avoidance only makes it grow. Pain is not a punishment. It's a wake-up call. When someone leaves and the emotional shock hits your heart, the first instinct is to resist the pain. You try to deny it, hide it, or distract yourself from it. But the more you resist, the stronger it becomes. Pain grows louder when you ignore it. It keeps whispering that something is out of alignment, something is not being acknowledged, something within you needs to be seen. You may think the pain is telling you that you lost something irreplaceable, but what it's really telling you is that there was something in that situation that wasn't meant to stay. Pain doesn't show up when everything is harmonious. It shows up when something inside you or around you needs to change. It shows up when your soul is trying to pull you away from what is harming you, limiting you, or slowing you down. Pain is not the enemy. It is the conversation you've been avoiding with yourself. It exposes the attachments you held too tightly, the expectations that were unrealistic, and the fears that were buried too deep. It shows you where you relied on someone else for happiness, validation, or direction. It points to the beliefs you adopted that don't serve you anymore. Pain is the light that shines on the parts of you you've been neglecting, the wounds you never healed, the patterns you kept repeating, the boundaries you never set, the self-love you postponed because you were too busy pouring into someone else. Pain comes when your inner world is calling for restructuring. When you feel hopeless because he's not coming back, the pain you feel isn't simply about the loss of the person. It's also about the loss of the future you imagined with him. You don't grieve only the relationship, you grieve the version of your life you were building in your mind. You grieve the dreams, the moments you thought you would have, the security you believed he would provide. Pain shows up to remind you that you were building your emotional stability on a fragile foundation, one that depended too much on someone else's consistency. Pain reveals where you put your hope, where you placed your expectations, and where you invested your energy. It exposes the truth that you were expecting someone else to fill a void that only self-understanding, clarity, and personal growth can fill. Pain forces you to look inward, even when you'd rather keep looking outward. It forces you to ask real questions. Why did this hurt so deeply? What was I expecting from him that I wasn't giving myself? Why did I attach so much of my worth to this person? Why did I fear losing him more than I feared losing myself? These questions are uncomfortable, but they're necessary. Pain pushes you into self-reflection because without reflection, there is no transformation. Pain is often the first step toward a new level of strength, awareness, and emotional intelligence. Pain is temporary, but the understanding it brings can last a lifetime. When you embrace the truth that pain is not permanent, you begin to breathe again. You start to recognize that emotional wounds are not meant to break you. They are meant to open you. They expose the layers of you that were never fully revealed because you were too busy trying to maintain a connection that wasn't aligned with who you are becoming. Pain stretches you. It makes you more aware. It awakens the strength inside you that you forgot you had. Pain teaches you how to let go without losing yourself. It teaches you how to surrender without feeling weak. It teaches you how to rebuild without waiting for someone to save you. Pain reveals your resilience. It reminds you that you are capable of surviving what you once thought would destroy you. It shows you that you can sit with your feelings without collapsing under them. It shows you that healing does not happen in a single moment. It happens in layers, in breaths, in quiet moments of acceptance. Pain is not here to tell you that he was your only chance at happiness. It's here to remind you that happiness was always inside you, waiting for the space to grow once the old attachments fell away. Pain clears the emotional clutter that kept you stuck. It removes the illusions, the fantasies, and the mental stories you were holding on to. It forces you to confront the reality that not everything or everyone is meant to stay. When you understand pain as a signal, you stop feeling like a victim of your circumstances. You begin to see that the universe uses discomfort to direct you toward a better version of yourself. Pain doesn't close your life. It opens it in ways you cannot see in the moment. It teaches you to trust yourself more deeply. It teaches you to rely on your own inner strength. It teaches you that even in heartbreak, there is wisdom, clarity, and opportunity for growth. Pain may break you open, but what emerges from that opening is not weakness. It is awareness, maturity, and the beginning of a new chapter that could not have begun without this moment. You can control your thoughts or let them control you, and the direction of your emotional life depends entirely on which choice you make. When you feel hopeless that he's never coming back, it is not just the absence of the person that hurts. It's the stream of thoughts your mind begins to create around that absence. Your mind starts replaying memories, imagining worst-case scenarios, building stories that don't exist, and convincing you that you'll never experience love, comfort, or connection again. These thoughts feel automatic, but they are not uncontrollable. The mind is like a projector, and your emotions are the movie playing on the screen. When the movie changes, the emotion changes. But most people don't realize they are the ones holding the remote. Negative feelings don't come from situations themselves. They come from the thoughts you attach to those situations. The moment he stops calling, the mind begins to whisper, he doesn't care. A's with someone else. You weren't enough. You will never be loved like that again. These thoughts create emotional storms that feel impossible to escape. But you must understand that a thought is only as powerful as the attention you give it. A thought is not a command. A thought is not a prophecy. A thought is not the truth. It is simply a mental suggestion, and you have the authority to accept it or reject it. Most people suffer because they accept every negative thought as reality. The mind tends to amplify fear because fear is familiar. Fear requires no discipline. It takes no effort to imagine the worst. This is why hopelessness grows so quickly, because the mind is constantly feeding you images of loss, rejection, abandonment, and loneliness. But what you think about over and over becomes what you feel, and what you feel becomes what you believe. When your internal dialogue becomes dominated by fear, your belief system shifts, your confidence drops, and your entire emotional state spirals downward. This is not because the situation is hopeless. It's because the thoughts about the situation are negative, repetitive, and uncontrolled. You cannot stop negative thoughts from appearing, but you can stop them from governing your life. A thought has no power without your involvement. It needs your energy to grow. It needs your attention to survive. It needs your fear to feel real. When you begin to step back and observe your thoughts instead of reacting to them, you break the cycle that has been controlling your emotions. You begin to see the difference between what your mind imagines and what reality actually is. You begin to understand that the mind's job is to generate thoughts, but your job is to choose which thoughts to entertain. When he leaves, the void activates old wounds, and the mind begins to operate from past pain. Thoughts like, I'm not lovable, everyone leaves, I always end up alone, are not coming from this moment. They're coming from the past. But because the mind projects these thoughts into the present, you believe they define your current reality. This is why self-awareness is so important. You must recognize when the mind is playing old programs, repeating old narratives, and using past experiences to shape your interpretation of the present situation. When you observe your thoughts, you interrupt the emotional power they hold over you. The key is to redirect your imagination. The same mental energy you use to imagine rejection can be used to imagine healing. The same energy used to imagine him never coming back can be used to imagine yourself becoming stronger, wiser, and more emotionally grounded. The mind cannot focus on two images at the same time. When you consciously create a new picture, the old one begins to fade. This is not denial, it is discipline. It is the practice of choosing thoughts that support your well-being instead of thoughts that destroy your peace. Every emotion you feel is the result of a thought that you accepted. If you want to change your emotional state, you must first change your mental state. When you shift the thought, you shift the feeling. When you shift the feeling, you shift your behavior. When you shift your behavior, you shift your entire life. This is why mental discipline is essential when dealing with heartbreak. Without discipline, the mind will take you to the darkest places. It will exaggerate pain, magnify loss, and create narratives that make you feel powerless. But when you take control, the mind becomes a tool instead of a prison. You must learn to challenge the thoughts that hurt you. When your mind says, he's not coming back because you weren't good enough, you must respond, that's a thought, not the truth. When your mind says, you will never feel loved again, you must answer, there are possibilities I cannot see yet. When your mind says, your life is over, you must declare, this moment is only a chapter, not the entire story. The more you challenge negative thoughts, the weaker they become. The mind begins to understand that you are no longer willing to be controlled by its fear-driven assumptions. Thoughts plant seeds, and whatever seed is watered the most becomes your emotional reality. If you water fear, fear grows. If you water hopelessness, hopelessness grows. But if you water strength, self-worth, clarity, and personal power, those begin to grow too. Emotional transformation begins in the mind long before it appears in your life. When you learn to manage your thoughts, you learn to master your emotions. When you master your emotions, hopelessness loses its grip. And when hopelessness loses its grip, you no longer wait for someone to return to feel whole again. His absence is creating the space you need, even if right now it feels like the space is nothing but emptiness, silence, and unanswered questions. When someone pulls away, the mind instantly interprets that distance as rejection, as abandonment, as proof that you weren't worthy of staying for. But what you must begin to understand is that space is not always a loss. Sometimes space is a divine interruption, a pause meant to protect you, redirect you, or prepare you for a version of yourself you would never have met if that person had continued standing beside you. Space is uncomfortable, but comfort has never created transformation. Growth comes from the moments that stretch your heart, challenge your emotions, and force you to look at your own life from a new perspective. When he was present, your life had a certain rhythm. Your days were shaped around the idea of him. His attention, his messages, his presence, his approval. When someone becomes a central part of your emotional landscape, their absence feels like the land has been stripped bare. But what you don't see yet is that the space left behind isn't empty, it's fertile. It's soil that's ready to grow new strength, new identity, new clarity, and new understanding. You may think this space is punishment, but it is actually provision. It is giving you room to finally hear your own thoughts without the noise of the relationship. It is giving you room to heal wounds you ignored while trying to keep him. It is giving you room to rebuild your self-worth without relying on his validation. Sometimes the universe removes people not because you failed, but because you were becoming too small around them. You were shrinking your needs to fit their inconsistency. You were lowering your standards to match their emotional limitations. You were compromising your boundaries, ignoring your intuition, and sacrificing your peace to maintain a connection that wasn't feeding your growth. In that state, you would never have seen your own potential clearly. You would never have discovered what you're truly capable of. You would never have asked yourself the deeper questions that only arise in solitude. His absence is not a void, it is an opening. Space allows you to see what was previously hidden. When someone is constantly in your life, you don't notice the patterns that drain you. You don't notice the parts of yourself you're neglecting. You don't notice how much emotional energy you're giving away. But when the person steps out of your daily experience, clarity begins to rise. You start seeing where you overinvested, where you allowed disrespect, where you ignored red flags, where you loved with your whole heart and received only fragments in return. This clarity is painful, but it is essential. Without space, you would still be clouded by emotion. With space, you begin to understand the truth. This space is also a reset. It gives you the chance to break emotional habits that were keeping you stuck. Maybe you were chasing too hard. Maybe you were trying to fix someone who didn't want to be fixed. Maybe you were pouring into someone who never poured back into you. Maybe you were hoping love would change a person who wasn't willing to change themselves. Space interrupts these patterns. It stops the emotional momentum that was leading you toward another cycle of disappointment. It gives you permission to pause, reflect, and rebuild from a place of strength instead of longing. His absence is also creating the space for you to return to yourself. When you are deeply attached to someone, your identity begins to merge with their presence. You forget your own dreams, your own desires, your own voice. You make room for them, but forget to make room for yourself. Space brings you back to the truth that you are a complete person, not a half searching for your other half. You begin to reconnect with your own inner world, your own goals, your own sense of purpose. You begin to realize that your life is not defined by whether someone stays or leaves. Your life is defined by the direction you choose for yourself. In this space, you also rediscover your emotional resilience. You start to see that even though the separation hurts, you are still waking up each day. You are still breathing, still thinking, still capable of building, creating, and evolving. You realize that the pain didn't break you. It revealed your strength. You realize that the silence didn't destroy you. It taught you how to listen to your intuition. You realize that being alone didn't crush you. It reminded you that you can stand on your own 2 feet. The space that feels like a wound is actually the beginning of a new level of emotional maturity. Sometimes people leave because their chapter in your life is complete. Sometimes they leave because their presence was blocking you from stepping into your next level. Sometimes they leave because staying would have kept you in a cycle that would have delayed your growth. His absence is not a barrier, it is a doorway. A doorway into a stronger version of you. A doorway into a clearer mind and a lighter heart. A doorway into a life where you no longer define your worth by who chooses you, but by who you choose to become. Emotional strength comes from discipline, not desire. And this is the part most people overlook when they're drowning in heartbreak. You may want to feel strong. You may wish the pain would disappear. You may hope that one morning you'll wake up and suddenly feel whole again. But emotional strength doesn't appear because you want it. It appears because you train it. It's a practice, not a mood. It's a choice, not a feeling. And when you're dealing with the heavy emotions that come with believing he's never coming back, desire alone won't save you. Only discipline can pull you out of the mental loops, the emotional spirals, and the patterns that keep you stuck in the same place day after day. When someone leaves your life, you're left with a storm of emotions: sadness, confusion, anger, longing, emptiness. These emotions feel powerful, and they are, but they're not stronger than your ability to choose how you respond. What makes them feel overwhelming is not the emotion itself, but the lack of discipline around it. People think emotional strength means feeling nothing. That's not strength, that's suppression. Emotional strength means you feel everything, but you don't let any of it control your behavior, your focus, or your future. It means you sit with the emotion, observe it, understand it, and still choose actions that support your healing instead of actions that prolong your suffering. Discipline is the decision to do what serves you even when it doesn't feel comfortable. Heartbreak destroys your routine, disrupts your mental balance, and throws you into emotional chaos. Without discipline, that chaos becomes your new normal. You start staying up late, scrolling through old messages, checking his social media, replaying conversations, imagining scenarios, and feeding emotional pain with the very thoughts that intensify it. Your mind tries to convince you that this behavior is coping, but it's actually self-inflicted emotional damage. Discipline is the force that stops this cycle. It's the moment when you tell yourself, I don't feel like doing this, but I must because my healing depends on it. Discipline looks like blocking the triggers even when part of you wants to look. Discipline looks like putting your phone down when your emotions are begging you to text him. Discipline looks like walking away from thoughts that make you feel small. Discipline looks like creating structure when your feelings want chaos. It means waking up with purpose instead of waking up and sinking into sadness. It means choosing a better thought even if your heart is pulling you toward the painful one. It means choosing actions that strengthen you instead of the ones that weaken you. Emotional strength is quiet, steady, and consistent. It's built through small disciplined choices repeated daily. Discipline also includes learning how to regulate your inner world. When your emotions are out of control, your mind becomes the enemy. It tells you things that aren't true, exaggerates the pain, magnifies the loss, and convinces you that you will never recover. Without discipline, you accept every thought as reality. With discipline, you question every thought that hurts. You learn to pause before reacting. You learn to observe before believing. You learn to breathe before responding. You learn to shift your inner state even when the outer situation hasn't changed. That is emotional mastery. That is the power to direct your mind instead of being swept away by it. People think emotional strength comes from being naturally strong. But the strongest people weren't born that way. They train their emotions the way others train their bodies. Emotional discipline is built in the moments you choose not to break. It's built when you refuse to chase someone who walked away. It's built when you decide not to replay old memories that reopen wounds. It's built when you choose silence instead of reacting out of desperation. It's built when you choose growth instead of clinging to what hurt you. Discipline is the foundation on which emotional resilience is built. Discipline is also the bridge between who you are now and who you want to become. When your emotions are loud, your discipline must become louder. When your heart is fragile, your decisions must become stronger. When your sadness pulls you backward, your habits must push you forward. This is how transformation happens, not through wishful thinking, but through repeated disciplined choices that gradually reshape your identity, your perspective, and your emotional power. Without discipline, heartbreak becomes a cycle that repeats itself. You keep missing him, going back to the same thoughts, reopening the same wounds, and wondering why nothing changes. But when you begin to practice discipline, everything changes. The thoughts lose their grip. The emotions lose their intensity. The longing loses its power. You start to feel grounded, centered, and in control again. You begin to see that healing is not just something that happens with time. It's something you build through deliberate effort. Discipline gives you the ability to detach. Not because you stop caring, but because you start caring about yourself more. It gives you the ability to stop waiting. Not because hope dies, but because you choose your future over your fear. It gives you the power to rebuild. Not because the pain disappears, but because you learn to move forward with it instead of being paralyzed by it. Emotional strength rises when discipline becomes your routine, when your actions stop aligning with your emotions and start aligning with your vision for your life. The return of peace is more important than the return of a person. And this truth becomes clearer the moment you stop chasing what hurts you and start listening to the quiet voice inside that's been asking for relief. When someone leaves, especially someone you cared about deeply, the mind convinces you that the only thing that will make you feel whole again is their return. You believe that everything will settle, everything will make sense, everything will feel right if they just come back and fill the void they left behind. But that belief is an illusion created by emotional attachment, not by truth. What your heart is really craving is not the return of the person. It's the return of inner peace, stability, clarity, and emotional balance. Peace is the foundation that allows you to think clearly, move intentionally, and rebuild your life in a way that supports your well-being instead of destroying it. Peace gives you the ability to see the situation for what it truly is, not for what you wish it could be. When you're desperate for someone to return, your mind becomes clouded with longing. You start holding on to fragments of hope, replaying the happiest moments, ignoring the moments of pain, and rewriting the past into something softer than it actually was. Desperation distorts memory, and longing blinds your judgment. But when peace begins to return, you see the relationship through a different lens. You begin to recognize the emotional imbalances, the unanswered needs, the little sacrifices that eventually became heavy, the quiet ways you abandoned yourself trying to hold on. Peace brings truth, and truth brings understanding. Without peace, you can't see anything clearly. Peace also restores your power. When you're emotionally overwhelmed, you give your power away. You let someone else's actions determine your mood, your sleep, your appetite, your productivity, and your sense of worth. You wake up thinking about them. You go to bed thinking about them. Your entire emotional world revolves around whether or not they care, whether or not they remember you, whether or not they might come back someday. When you live like this, you're not living, you're waiting. But when peace returns, you stop waiting and start living again. You stop basing your happiness on someone else's decisions. You stop allowing someone's absence to dictate your identity. You begin to reclaim your inner authority, the part of you that decides how you feel regardless of what someone else chooses to do. Peace brings stability to your emotions. When your heart is broken, every small memory, every thought, every reminder can trigger an emotional spiral. Your mind moves between hope and hopelessness, love and resentment, longing and anger. It's a constant storm. But peace calms the storm. Peace teaches you that emotions come in waves, and you don't need to drown in every one of them. It teaches you that you can acknowledge your pain without being consumed by it. It teaches you that you can miss someone without losing yourself in the process. Peace turns overwhelming emotions into manageable ones, and that shift alone can transform your entire healing journey. Peace also opens the door to self-respect. When you're focused on getting someone back, you're often willing to shrink your self-worth in the process. You tolerate disrespect, inconsistency, emotional distance, and breadcrumbs of attention because you think those crumbs are better than nothing. But peace shows you the truth. You deserve more than crumbs. You deserve consistency, respect, reciprocity, and effort. Peace helps you recognize that getting someone back at the cost of your dignity is not a win, it's a loss. When peace returns, your standards rise. You stop begging for love and start expecting healthy love. You stop accepting confusion and start valuing clarity. You stop chasing and start choosing. The return of peace reconnects you to yourself. When your focus is entirely on him, where he is, what he's thinking, whether he'll come back, you lose connection to your own soul. You forget your dreams, your goals, your inner voice, your sense of direction. But when peace returns, you remember who you are outside of the relationship. You reconnect with your ambitions, your creativity, your desires, your strengths. You realize that life didn't end when he left. It simply paused, waiting for you to return to yourself. Peace restores that inner connection, and once you have that, no relationship loss can break you the same way again. Peace gives you the ability to let go, not because you stop caring, but because you finally understand that holding on is hurting you more than letting go ever could. It gives you the clarity to accept that not all love stories are meant to continue. Some are meant to teach you, some are meant to redirect you, and some are meant to prepare you for someone who will love you without hesitation, without confusion, and without disappearing when things get difficult. Peace helps you see that the end of a relationship is not the end of your life. It's the beginning of a new emotional chapter that has the potential to be healthier, stronger, and far more fulfilling. When peace returns, you stop craving closure from the other person and start creating closure within yourself. You stop asking, "Why did he leave?" and start asking, "What did this experience reveal about me?" You stop wondering if he'll ever come back and start focusing on how you can grow from the pain. You stop waiting for someone else to give you emotional stability and start building it through your own actions. Peace is not something that comes from another person returning. Peace is something you cultivate from within, and once it returns, it becomes the foundation on which you rebuild your emotional life in a way that no absence, no breakup, and no heartbreak can ever destroy.